So let's talk about what happens when someone who's incredibly capable, someone at the top of their game, just completely breaks down. We're going to dissect the anatomy of a collapse, using an ancient story to understand a very modern problem.
Have you ever had this feeling? It's that awful sense of paralysis, where you know exactly what the right thing to do is, but you just can't bring yourself to do it. That feeling, right there, is the heart of what we're unpacking today.
Okay, let's dive in. And right off the bat, we need to get one thing straight. This is not about moral failure. It's not about being weak. We're looking at this like a total systemic psychological breakdown, a complete system crash. Our case study for this is the very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. But here's the twist you might not expect. This chapter isn't actually about wisdom. It's about the complete failure that has to happen before any real wisdom can even begin to sink in. Now, the guy at the center of all this, Arjuna, he's no pushover. I want you to think of him as a top-tier professional. He's highly trained, he's ethical, he's respected. He's the last person you'd expect to see at a breaking point, which, of course, makes his collapse all the more important to understand. And here's a really curious detail. While Arjuna is having this complete agonizing meltdown, his mentor, Krishna, says absolutely nothing, not one word. You have to ask yourself, why would a guide just stand there and watch their student totally fall apart? Well, it's because this whole first chapter serves a very specific function. It's purely diagnostic. The idea here is that you can't fix a system until you let the failure play out and show you exactly what's broken. We're watching, in real time, as Arjuna's perception, his reasoning, his morality, it all gets twisted and distorted under the emotional load. So, this brings us to the real conflict. We're going to shift our focus now from the obvious external problem, the battlefield, to the real war, the one happening entirely inside Arjuna's mind. You see, it's easy to look at this and think, well, of course he's breaking down, war is horrible. But that's just the surface story. He knew what he was getting into. The real problem, the thing that actually triggers the system crash, is when his deep personal attachments suddenly get activated. And it's a very specific sequence of events. First, he looks across the battlefield, and he doesn't just see an enemy army. He sees his teachers, his cousins, his family. Second, his identity as a person, a student, a relative, slams right into his professional duty as a warrior. And third, that collision is just too much. The whole system just crashes. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. What does this collapse actually look and feel like? We're going to break down both the physical and the mental symptoms as they're described in the text. The description here is almost like a medical report. His limbs get weak, his mouth goes completely dry, his body starts trembling, his weapon, the symbol of his power and duty, literally slips out of his hand, and his mind is just racing. This isn't poetry, it's a textbook description of a full-blown physiological stress response. The physical stuff is pretty dramatic, but the more subtle, and I think more interesting question is this. What is his sharp, highly trained intelligence doing while all this is going on? Does it just switch off? No, and this is the crucial part. There's a huge difference between thinking and overthinking. Normally, your intelligence is a tool to find clarity, but in a state of collapse like this, it flips. It becomes a defense mechanism, not to find the truth, but to protect you from what you're afraid of. So get this, Arjuna's intelligence doesn't disappear. It gets hijacked. It's actually weaponized to build this incredible, elaborate fortress of justifications around his fear. He starts making all these sophisticated moral arguments, not because he's suddenly enlightened, but because he needs to make his desire to run away feel noble and right. Okay, so let's bring this into our world. How does this ancient pattern of a cognitive collapse show up on your modern battlefield? In your job, in your life? So, how does this feel today? Well, it feels like burnout that you tell yourself is just you standing up for your ethics. It's avoiding that really hard conversation, but calling it compassion. It's that total paralysis before a big project disguised as humility or just needing more information. This right here captures that internal feeling perfectly. On the surface, all your arguments for not acting sound totally logical. You feel morally right. But inside, you're a wreck. You're anxious. You're unstable. There is a complete disconnect between your story and your state. And this is exactly why the Gita starts this way. It's making a profound point. Wisdom is useless. All the advice in the world is just noise until you're willing to look at your own confusions squarely in the face without all the fancy justifications.
Which brings us right back to that central mystery. Krishna, the ultimate teacher, just stands by and lets this entire system failure complete itself. He lets Arjuna hit rock bottom. And the question is, why? Why let the breakdown run its full course?
We're going to start chipping away at that question in our next explainer. We'll be decoding something even more subtle, how our deepest personal attachments become so good at disguising themselves as our highest virtues. You won't want to miss it.